Hello, everybody. Glad to see you. You ready to sing? Now it's time to gather round, gather round, gather round. Now it's time to gather round at Sunday school today. Now it's time to celebrate, celebrate, celebrate. Now it's time to celebrate at Sunday school today. Now it's time to sit back down, sit back down, sit back down. Now it's time to sit back down at Sunday school today. Now our ears are open wide, open wide, open wide. Now our ears are open wide at Sunday school today. I'm getting ready to celebrate here, big celebration. Got my party hat, got my balloons, a whole bag of balloons I got to blow up here. Start with the blue one. Okay. We're getting ready to celebrate. Today we're going to be talking about a special celebration called Jubilee. Have you ever heard that word? There's instructions in the Bible about how to celebrate Jubilee, but they don't say anything about party hats or balloons. So we'll get rid of this stuff. Don't need it. Don't need it for Jubilee. There are lots of instructions in the Bible for various things. One of those sets of instructions is the Ten Commandments in the Old Testament. Jesus gives us lots of instructions in the New Testament about how to live, including love everybody, no matter what. And we're going to look at a couple of different places in the Bible today where some instructions are given, including how to celebrate Jubilee. And celebrating Jubilee is different than just throwing a big party. Jubilee did make people happy like a party would, but Jubilee makes people happy in doing what's best for God's earth and what's best to be fair to each other. And Jubilee was, or is, a year-long celebration that happens only once every 50 years. And how to celebrate Jubilee will be our second Bible story. But first, we are going to look at just a verse, Micah 6:8. And I've got it here for you. Micah is in the Old Testament, but you don't need to look it up because I've got the verse for you right here. He has told you, O mortal, what is good. A mortal is a human being. Somebody who someday is going to die, who is not like God, who lives forever. He has told you, he here is God. God has told you, O human being, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God? And like I said, that's in Micah 6:8. If you can take a screenshot of this and print it out, you could color in these letters to help you remember the verse. But another way to make remembering verses easier is to sing them in a song. So I have a song for you that we are going to sing. So this song is actually in our hymnal, hymn number 690, and it's called What Does the Lord Require of You? So let's get our piano started here to play along with us, and let's sing it. What does the Lord require of you? Justice, kindness, to seek justice and love kindness and walk humbly with your God. I knew that was going to happen, that the piano was going to stop before the end of the song. But we're not going to let that bother us. Let's try it again now that you know a little bit about how it goes. So those were our first set of instructions from Micah 6:8. Seek justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with your God. So now on to our main story. As I already said, there are more instructions and teachings in the Bible than just the Ten Commandments. There's lots of instructions, especially in the Old Testament. The first 5 books of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, are all books of instructions. And our story today is from the 3rd book of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, chapter 25, the whole chapter. And it starts out, the Lord said to Moses on Mount Sinai, speak to the Israelites and say to them. That's how it starts. So remember that Moses went up on the top of the mountain to get the 10 Commandments when the Israelites were on their way from being slaves in Egypt to the promised land, the land that God was going to give them. And it took them 40 years to get there. And so what we're going to hear about the instructions of how to celebrate Jubilee were other instructions that Moses got when he was, at the same time he was getting the 10 Commandments, on their way to the promised land. And some of the instructions were how to live once they got to the promised land. And the celebration of Jubilee was part of those instructions. So, the story, Leviticus 25, starts this way. The Lord said to Moses on Mount Sinai, speak to the Israelites and say to them, once you enter the land that I am giving you, and then there are lots of instructions on how they're supposed to live once they get there. So, our Bible lesson today is the whole chapter of Leviticus 25. I'm not going to read you the whole chapter. We'll sort of do it as a summary, and you get to help. Just a minute, I will explain how we're going to do that. So, Leviticus 25, where the Bible talks about Jubilee. So this is how we're gonna do it. I'm going to be Moses. I'm going to read Moses' part, and then there's going to be some words that the people say, and you are going to be the people. So after I get done saying what Moses says, the people will say, we have heard the word of God, and we will let the land rest. Okay? So I'm going to read Moses' part, and you be ready to say, we have heard the word of God, and we will let the land rest. Hear these words from God that I received on Mount Sinai. When you enter the land that I am giving to you, plant your fields, trim your vineyards, gather your crops. But on the 7th year, let the land rest. You may eat what grows naturally on the land, but you must not farm it. The 7th year is a Sabbath for the land. Okay, now your part. We have heard the voice of God. We will let the land rest. So Moses is still saying what God has said to tell the people. Count off 7 Sabbath years. So a Sabbath year was every 7 years. So 7 Sabbath years would be 7 times 7, which is 49. And then after that comes the 50th year. So count off 7 Sabbath years. Then in the 50th year, sound the trumpets everywhere. Proclaim a year of Jubilee. The 50th year is a holy year, a year of freedom. Everyone return to your home. Return to your family. Do not plant or harvest. Eat only what grows freely, for this is a year of Jubilee. We have heard the word of God. We will return, we will rest, and we will celebrate. Okay, what's that a picture of that just popped up on the screen there? Then in the 50th year, sound the trumpets. Do you think this was a trumpet like they had back in Moses' time? This kind of trumpet with the valves and everything, we have had less than 200 years. Back in Moses' time, here's what a trumpet looked like. Does that look like a trumpet? That is called a shofar, and it's made out of a ram's horn. So, do you think you could play that like a trumpet? There's a picture of a man playing a shofar, and I am going to play you some recordings of what a shofar sounds like. Okay, here's what a shofar sounds like. Okay, so it sounds like a trumpet, but it doesn't look like a trumpet. So the Hebrew word that is in the Bible there when the Bible is in Hebrew is shofar. And that is what a shofar looks like. It looks like a ram's horn, and that's what it sounds like. Okay, back to our story. Remember, this is what God told Moses to tell the people. So even though it says Moses is saying it, this is actually from God. When you buy or sell, do not cheat one another. And if you sold your land to support your family, celebrate, for all land must return to its first owners. If you sold your house to buy food, celebrate, because all houses must return to their first owners too. These are things that are supposed to happen in the year of Jubilee, every 50 years. If somebody had to sell their house in order to get enough money to buy food, then they would get their house back at Jubilee. We have heard the word of God. We will treat one another fairly. Suppose you ask, what will we eat in the 7th year if we don't farm our land? Do not worry. The land will give its fruit, and I will bless the harvest on the 6th year, so you will have enough. We have heard the word of God. We will have enough. And remember, land cannot be sold with no way of getting it back, because the land belongs to me, the Creator. Remember, this is God talking. You are only strangers and guests. We have heard the word of God. We will respect the land. Suppose one of your own people becomes poor and has to give up their land. And suppose they have no one to buy it back for them. And suppose things do not go well and they cannot earn enough to buy their land back. Then the buyer will keep it until the year of Jubilee. And at that time, the land will be returned to them, free of charge. We have heard the word of God. The land will be returned. Suppose any of your own people become poor, and suppose they can't take care of themselves. Then help them just as you would help a guest or stranger. Then those who become poor can continue to live among you. If you lend them money, you must not charge them interest. If you sell them food, you must not sell for more than you paid for it. We have heard the word of God. We will care for each other. And if any of you becomes so poor that you sell yourself as a servant, you will be made free in the year of Jubilee. I brought you out of slavery in Egypt. You shall not live as slaves to one another. Okay, let's do something fun. The year of Jubilee only happened every 50 years. And during that year, everyone rested and returned to their original land and homes. So we are going to do something. We're going to move around for a little while. And then when I yell Jubilee, everybody has to run back to their original spot, their original home, and rest. Okay, so what should we do first? How about skipping? Let's skip around, and when I yell Jubilee, back to your original spot and rest, okay? Jubilee! Back to our original spots. Rest. Not for a whole year, though, okay? Now let's march. Jubilee! Back to your original spot and rest. One more. Hop. Jubilee! Back. I really do need to rest now. A little bit out of breath after all that hopping. Okay, was that fun? Okay, let's review our story a little bit. We're going to review our story with a song. I'm not sure if I remember to actually finish the story. You, the people of Israel, belong to me. You are my people, and I am your God. Can't remember if I remembered that part or not. Okay, so our song. This is a song by a man called Brian Moyer Sutterman, and we are going to listen to him sing the song, and we can sing along. So here's the things I want you to listen for in the song as we review our story. So, first of all, he's calling Jubilee the celebration of God's loving. And here's some other words of the song that we're going to get to later. There's debts that are forgiven and a chance for a new beginning. So a debt is when someone borrows money. And if a debt is forgiven, it means they don't have to pay it back. So that would be something that would happen in the Jubilee year. There's land that's rearranging. And I think that's talking about giving land back to people who had to sell it because they needed the money. And then another verse says, there's care for all creation and the seeds of a restoration. So that's talking about letting the land rest for a year after growing crops for 6 years. So let's get this guy singing here, and we can follow along and sing along, and you'll know the song. You'll know how it goes by the time he gets to the end. So here's Brian Moyer Sutherland singing There's a Jubilee a-comin'.
There's a Jubilee a-comin', yes I know. There's a Jubilee a-comin', yes I know. Yes I know. There's a Jubilee a-comin', the celebration of God's love. And there's a Jubilee a-comin', yes I know. There's debts that are forgiven, yes I know. There's debts that are forgiven, yes I know. There's debts that are forgiven and the chance of a new beginning. There's debts that are forgiven, yes I know. There's a Jubilee a-comin', yes I know. There's a Jubilee a-comin', yes I know. Yes I know. There's a Jubilee a-comin', the celebration of God's love. And there's a Jubilee a-comin', yes I know. There's land that's rearranging, yes I know. There's land that's rearranging, yes I know. There's land that's rearranging, even though it may sound strange. And there's land that's rearranging, yes I know. There's a Jubilee a-comin', yes I know. There's a Jubilee a-comin', yes I know. Yes I know. There's a Jubilee a-comin', the celebration of God's love. And there's a Jubilee a-comin', yes I know. There's care for all creation, yes I know. There's care for all creation, yes I know. There's care for all creation and the seeds of a restoration. Care for all creation, yes I know. There's a Jubilee a-comin', yes I know. There's a Jubilee a-comin', yes I know. Yes I know. There's a Jubilee a-comin', the celebration of God's love. And there's a Jubilee a-comin', yes I know. There's a Jubilee a-comin', yes I know. There's a Jubilee a-comin', yes I know. Yes I know. There's a Jubilee a-comin', the celebration of God's love. And there's a Jubilee a-comin', yes I know.
Now I have a book to read with you. It's called Henry's Freedom Box, and it was written by Ellen Levine, and the lovely pictures in this book were drawn by Kadir Nelson. Now, I checked this book out from the Auburn Public Library, and so if you want to read it at home, you can check it out from the Auburn Public Library. Now, this is a true story. That happened back when people were allowed to own slaves in this country. It starts when Henry was a little boy, and during the story, he grows up. Henry's Freedom Box. Henry Brown wasn't sure how old he was. Henry was a slave, and slaves weren't allowed to know their birthdays. Henry and his brothers and sisters worked in the big house where the master lived. Henry's master had been good to Henry and his family, but Henry's mother knew things could change. Do you see those leaves blowing in the wind? They are torn from the trees like slave children are torn from their families. One morning, the master called for Henry and his mother. They climbed the wide staircase. The master lay in bed, with only his head above the quilt. He was very ill. He beckoned them to come closer. Some slaves were freed by their owners. Henry's heart beat fast. Maybe the master would set them free. But the master said, "You are a good worker, Henry. I'm giving you to my son. You must obey him and never tell a lie." Henry nodded, but he didn't say thank you. That would have been a lie. Later that day, Henry watched a bird soar high above the trees. Free bird, happy bird, Henry thought. Henry said goodbye to his family. He looked across the field. The leaves swirled in the wind. So you can see Henry's a little bit older now, but he's still not a grown-up. But he's working in a factory. Henry worked in his new master's factory. He was good at his job. "Do not tear that tobacco leaf," the boss yelled at the new boy. He poked the boy with a stick. If you made a mistake, the boss would beat you. Henry was lonely. One day he met Nancy, who was shopping for her mistress. They walked and talked and agreed to meet again. Henry felt like singing, but slaves didn't dare sing in the streets. Instead, he hummed all the way home. Months later, Henry asked Nancy to be his wife. When both their masters agreed, Henry and Nancy were married. Soon there was a little baby, then another, and another. Henry knew that they were very lucky. They lived together even though they had different masters. But Nancy was worried. Her master had lost a great deal of money. "I'm afraid he will sell our children," she said. Henry sat very still. Henry worked hard all morning. He tried to forget what Nancy had said. His friend James came into the factory. He whispered to Henry, "Your wife and children were just sold at the slave market." "No!" cried Henry. Henry couldn't move. He couldn't think. He couldn't work. "Twist that tobacco," the boss poked Henry. Henry twisted tobacco leaves. His heart twisted in his chest. At lunchtime, Henry rushed to the center of town. A large group of slaves was tied together. The owner shouted at them. Henry looked for his family. "Father, father!" Henry watched his children disappear down the road. Where was Nancy? He saw her the same moment she saw him. When he wiped away his tears, Nancy too was gone. There's his children being taken away. Henry no longer sang. He couldn't hum. He went to work, and at night he ate supper and went to bed. Henry tried to think of happy times, but all he could see were the carts carrying away everyone he loved. Henry knew he would never see his family again. Many weeks passed. One morning, Henry heard singing. A little bird flew out of a tree into the open sky, and Henry thought about being free. But how? As he lifted a crate, he knew the answer. He asked James and Dr. Smith to help him. Dr. Smith was a white man who thought slavery was wrong. They met early the next day at an empty warehouse. Henry arrived with a box. "I will mail myself to a place where there are no slaves," he said. James stared at the box, then at Henry. "What if you cough and someone hears you?" "I will cover my mouth and hope," Henry said. Dr. Smith wrote on the box, "To William H. Johnson, Arch Street, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania." Henry would be delivered to friends in Philadelphia. Then he printed on the crate in big letters, "This side up, with care." Henry needed an excuse to stay home, or the work boss would think he had run off. James pointed to Henry's sore finger, but Henry knew it wasn't bad enough. He opened a bottle of oil of vitriol. I don't know what that is either, but it must be nasty stuff. We'll read on and hear what the oil of vitriol did to his hand. "No," cried James. Henry poured it on his hand. It burned his skin to the bone. Now the boss would have to let him stay home. Dr. Smith bandaged Henry's hand. They arranged to meet the next morning at 4 o'clock in the morning. The sun was not yet up when Henry climbed into the box. "Ready," he said. James nailed down the lid. Dr. Smith and James drove to the station. The railway clerk tipped the box over and nailed a paper to the bottom. Dr. Smith begged the clerks to be careful, but they didn't listen. They threw the box into the baggage car. Hours passed. Henry was lifted up and thrown again, upside down. He heard waves splashing. This must be the steamboat headed for Washington, D.C. The ship rode smoothly, but Henry was still upside down. Blood rushed to his head. His face got hot. His eyes ached. He thought his head would burst. But he was afraid to move. Someone might hear him. See that look on his face? How uncomfortable he is upside down inside that box? "I'm tired of standing," someone said. "Why don't we move that box and sit on it?" said another. Henry held his breath. Could they be talking about his box? Henry was pushed. The box scraped the deck. Now he was on his right side. Now on his left. And suddenly, right side up. He's finally right side up. "What do you think is in here?" said the first man. "Mail, I guess," said the other. "I am mail," thought Henry, "but not the kind they imagine." Henry was carried off the steamboat and placed in a railroad car, this time right side up. He fell asleep to the rattling song of the train wheels. He awoke to a loud knocking. "Henry, are you all right in there?" "All right," he answered. The cover was pried open. Henry stretched and stood up. 4 men smiled at him. "Welcome to Philadelphia." At last Henry had a birthday, March 30th, 1849, his first day of freedom. And from that day on, he also had a middle name. Everyone called him Henry Box Brown. that's the end of the story. And the author has here at the end of the book something called an author's note explaining a little bit more about the book. And I'm going to read that to you. In the mid 1800s, there were about 4 million slaves living in the United States. Slaves were owned, like tables or cows or wagons. Historians believe between 60,000 and 100,000 slaves escaped to freedom, traveling on what was called the Underground Railroad. The Underground Railroad wasn't a real railroad, and it wasn't underground either. It was called underground because it was secret. It was all the secret ways slaves made their way from the south to the north, where they could be free. They hid in carts, rode on horseback, walked hundreds of miles through forests and swamps, and crossed flowing rivers in summer and icebound rivers in winter. Conductors and station masters hid them and helped them throughout their journey. So on a railroad, on a passenger train, the people that work there are called conductors and station masters. And so on this underground railroad, they called the people who helped the slaves move along towards the north, they called them conductors and station masters to make it sound more like a railroad. When Henry Brown climbed into his freedom box, he hoped he'd be carried to a safe world. He brought along a small tool to make air holes, a little water, and a few biscuits. Henry arrived in Philadelphia having traveled 350 miles from Richmond, Virginia in 27 hours. That's more than a whole day. His story made newspaper headlines in America and Europe. Henry never found Nancy and his children. In 1850, he went to England, and there are some reports that he married again. We do know with absolute certainty that Henry Box Brown became one of the most famous runaway slaves on the Underground Railroad, the man who mailed himself to freedom. So Jubilee is about making things right and becoming a free person instead of a slave was making things right for Henry Brown. And there are lots of things in this world that still need to be made right. We still need to have more Jubilee and making things right. I have another book for you. This one also came from the library. You can also check this one out from Auburn Public Library. And it's called Melina's Jubilee, the story of a fresh start. And this book is written by Zetta Elliott and illustrated by Aaron Boyd. This is a present day story. And Jubilee, making things right, is also a fresh start in new beginnings. So this book is about Melina's Jubilee, her fresh start, her new beginning. So this story is written like Melina's talking to us. So it starts out, I woke up this morning. So Melina is saying, I woke up this morning. So this is all about Melina. I woke up this morning with a song in my heart and looked out my window. The night rain had washed away our chalk drawings. But I didn't mind. The sidewalk was clean, and that meant we could start over. This morning, I remembered to make my bed. Yesterday, I forgot. Yesterday, I also forgot to put my toys away. And when Grandma's friend came over, he tripped on one and banged into the table. That's how my mother's favorite vase got broken. It seemed like everyone was mad at me. This morning, when I crept into the kitchen and slipped into my seat, Grandma winked at me. Mama set down my breakfast and kissed the top of my head. Does this mean you aren't mad at me anymore? I asked them. I never let the sun go down on my anger, Grandma said. Today's a new day, Melina, Mama added, and that means you've got a fresh start. After work, I'm going to stop at the store to get some glue. Maybe this evening you can help me fix my vase. After breakfast, I told Grandma about the song in my heart. She put the dishes in the sink and began running the water. Steam and bubbles drifted up towards my grandmother's pretty face. I feel that way some days, she said. Some days I wake up feeling like I'm brand new. She chuckled, and that's a pretty special feeling for an old lady like me. I chuckled too and told Grandma that today felt like the first page of a brand new book. Well, what are you planning to write on that first page? She asked me. I told her I wasn't sure. When we finished the dishes, I called my best friend Helen and told her to meet me outside. On my way out, I passed behind my older brother Miles. I thought about the time last week when he snuck up behind me and whacked me over the head with his tennis racket. Now I had a chance to pay him back. I thought about how surprised Miles would be when the heavy cushion from the sofa went whump upside his head. But then I remembered that this was my fresh start day, and pounding Miles didn't seem like such a good idea. After all, he'd only hit me back, and Miles hits hard. So I left him alone and went outside. Helen was standing on the sidewalk. She looked upset. What's wrong? I asked. The poem I wrote about the rainbow got washed away, said Helen. So write a new poem, I suggested. Helen knelt down and started drawing a flower instead. I took a piece of chalk and wrote, There is a song in my heart. What's your song about? Helen asked. I'm not sure, I said, but it makes me want to celebrate. Helen stopped drawing. Celebrate what? I looked around. I don't know. Maybe the sun or those trees over there. We could celebrate flowers and birds. We could even celebrate being friends. Helen rolled her eyes. Whatever you say, Melina. I hummed softly to myself. When it was time for lunch, we went inside. Grandma's out back, Miles mumbled with his mouth full of food. Helen and I looked out the back door and saw Grandma digging in her garden. Are you girls hungry? She called to us. Helen and I nodded. Suddenly I had an idea. Grandma, why don't we eat the things that are growing in your garden? Grandma pushed back her sun hat and studied me for a minute. Then she shrugged, picked up her basket, and started telling us what to pick. We had the most delicious lunch. When we finished eating, Grandma gave us some money. Helen and I ran outside and followed the tinkling tune of the ice cream truck. Up the block, we saw Gavin and his twin brothers. Helen tugged my arm. Hey, Mel, Gavin owes you $1, remember? I remembered. I loaned it to him last week at the pizza shop. Gavin never gets to buy anything for himself. He always has to share with his little brothers. When we reached the truck, Helen tugged my arm again. Tell Gavin you want your money back, she whispered. Then we can get double swirl cones. Gavin was counting coins in the palm of his hand. He looked up and smiled at us. Hey, Melina. Hey, Helen. On another day, I would have told Gavin I wanted my money back, but today was my fresh start day. Let's pool our money, I suggested. That way we can buy a hot fudge sundae and split it 5 ways. 5 ways, gasped Helen. The twins started jumping up and down. Sprinkles, sprinkles, they cried. Gavin stared at the coins in his hand. I'm not sure, Melina. Well, I am, I said. We carried our hot fudge sundae over to the park and dug in. Then we spread out on top of the jungle gym and took turns pointing out funny shaped clouds. After a while, we got quiet. Then Gavin said, "Have you ever thought about the sun?" "What about it?" I asked. "Well," said Gavin, "there's only one sun that shines on everybody in the world, no matter where you live or how you look or how much money you have. Sunshine's free for everyone," said Helen. "I never thought of it that way," I said. We got quiet again. I closed my eyes and felt the sun beaming down on me. I began to hum, softly at first, but Gavin heard me and joined in. "Is that the song in your heart?" asked Helen. I nodded and kept on humming. "What's it about?" asked Gavin. "Oh, lots of things," I said. "It's about waking up to a blue sky and finding out you've been forgiven. It's about free sunshine and the tasty things that grow in my grandmother's garden. But mostly it's about having a chance to start all over again every single day." And that's the end of that book. Now I have a video for you from a YouTube channel called Jubilee. And the group of people who have this YouTube channel are called the Jubilee Project. And they make inspiring videos with the goal of creating empathy for human good. And empathy is when you understand how other people feel. And they think that this is part of Jubilee. So in this video, they ask some children of different ages, some are really young and some are a little bit older, some questions. The first question, and I want you to think about it before you hear the children's answers, the other children's answers. If you could make any wish, what would it be? I know that's a hard question, so think about it a little bit. And then the next question they ask some of the children is, if you were to give a message to adults, what would your message be? That's another question for you to think about. Now in this video, it looks like they're in a school library. They come in, they sit down, and they get asked these two questions.
I wish I can have a lot of toys, but homeless people and food is even more important.
Spring comes rebirth. Many of us read.
Okay, let's try that again. Hopefully without an ad this time.
I wish I can have a lot of toys, but homeless people and food is even more important.
And take a seat right here for me.
Okay.
Awesome. Are you nervous at all? If you could have any wish, what would you wish for?
Tough. Hard one. A robot that would do everything for me. A Bugatti. An invention. I wish that unicorns were real. I could have superpowers. To bend metal and bite it. An endless pizza. You eat it, it comes back. For more wishes for everyone so they could get whatever they wanted. Like me.
Having a better life and like not struggle with like my mom, seeing her like struggle with bills, not so like have more money.
I would wish for like homeless people to not be homeless. Change pollution. Make a cure for cancer. Travel around and give people hope. World peace. Well, I watch the news a lot, so I've noticed a lot of people getting killed or a lot of murders and stuff like that. Sometimes the world makes me sad because people aren't educated enough to know about how unwise prejudice is. I don't know why people fight so much. I think that because they're just mad or frustrated a little bit, or they've just had a bad day. It's okay if everyone's different. God made us different ways. If everyone treated people with love, then Earth would be a better place to live.
If you were to give a message to adults, what would your message be?
Stop. Look at what you're doing. Forget about money. And think about what you really care about. Because if you don't do anything about it, to not help it, then it just gets worse. I think it's really important that we love each other. If we all work together, we can change the world. We can make a difference.
You believe that?
Yeah.
So, Jubilee is making things right in the world. And these children had some good ideas about how to make things right in the world. And I'm sure you do too. I have another review for you, a review of our story about Jubilee in Leviticus. So this is a word jumble. The words in the sentences below have become jumbled, but it's the year of Jubilee. Return the letters to their original spot so the sentences make sense. And all the sentences can be found in today's Reader's Theater. And the Reader's Theater is what we did when I read Moses' part and you read the people's part, okay? So some of these letters I thought were sort of hard to read. This is a V, this is a U. And so all the words that had V's in them, I wrote again over here because I thought those V's were hard to read. So when I get done explaining this to you, you can pause the video and unscramble these words and fill in these blanks. Now, several of these go together. I don't think so. I thought that. I thought that these dots meant that it continued on to the next one, but now that I look at it a little bit more carefully, I think the dots just mean that the whole sentence isn't there. But you can unscramble those words. And when you get done, start the video again because today we are going to sing before we leave. And I'll tell you why when you start the video again after you're done doing this word scramble. Okay. This is the last time I'm going to make a Sunday school video for you. Soon, we're going to be having Sunday school at church again. So you'll come to church for Sunday school starting August 8th. I won't be your teacher anymore. You'll have other teachers who will be your same teachers every Sunday. And so we're going to sing. I'm going to sing with you one last time. Now it's time to say goodbye to online Sunday school. Okay. Now it's time to say goodbye, say goodbye, say goodbye. Now it's time to say goodbye to online Sunday school. Soon it's time to say hello, say hello, say hello. Soon it's time to say hello to Sunday school at church. So I'm looking forward to seeing you all at church at the Sunday School Kickoff Pancake Breakfast on August 8th. Until then, bye-bye.